want to welcome folks to February's webinar for Kirk. You're in the right place if you're here for the Kirk webinar. Today is the 22nd of February, and we'll give a minute or so to let folks jump on in here before we get going. But yes, you are in the right place for the Kirk February webinar. As we do let people and see people rolling in, if folks want to, they're always welcome to drop in their name and where they're joining us from in the chat, whether it's a school or institution or just a location. If it's somewhere warm and nice, let us know so we can be jealous. All right, we'll give people about another, I guess, yeah, we'll get going right now as we see about 60 people. And there's Josh, I think. Hi, Josh. Okay, great. Well, again, you're in the right place. It is February 22nd, 2024, and you're joined in on our first webinar for the 2024 year. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Really appreciate it. My name is Corey Berman. I'm coming to you from Burlington, Vermont. I am the program manager for Zero Waste at the University of Vermont up here in Burlington. And it's actually not that bad today. We have some relatively balmy mid-season weather up here. So, but again, thanks, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our first webinar for this year. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this afternoon. Today's presentation topic is leveraging federal funding for campus sustainability and waste reduction. I'm really excited to dig into this. I think it's going to be really interesting. Again, I'm the Zero Waste Program Manager at the University of Vermont. And for those of you not familiar with Kirk, we're a community of zero waste champions in higher education. We are a free member-based organization that works toward waste reduction, diversion, and sustainable materials management through information sharing, educational support, and networking opportunities between staff, faculty, and students. Today's session is part of our free webinar series that runs every other month throughout the year. The webinar series is designed to highlight innovative campus programs, provide trends and perspectives on a broad range of operational and educational topics related to collegiate recycling and sustainable materials management. We do have a few housekeeping notes to go over. As usual, if you're familiar with Zoom, if you have problems with your audio or video during the webinar, you can visit Zoom's support center by visiting support.zoom.us. To avoid background noise, we've placed all but our panelists' lines on mute. During the session, we encourage you to submit questions at any time by using the Q&A section to type us a note. Of course, we'll get to as many of these as possible at the end of the presentation. For general comments or notes, please feel free to use the chat function in the dashboard. And copies of today's presentation slides will be available to download, and the full recording will be available to stream on our website, which is kirk3r.org. I want to take a moment to highlight and encourage folks to join the Recycle listserv. This is a great resource that covers all sorts of topics related to recycling and waste reduction programs at colleges and universities, as well as topics of interest to persons responsible for planning and implementing such programs. Subscription to Recycle is free and open to anyone. To subscribe, please click on the link that's going to be dropped in the chat right now. You'll see a button. When you do, you'll see a button that reads Ask to Join the Group. And once you complete this, you will be able to post and respond to messages, as well as receive emails with messages from the listserv. It really is a great resource for folks, and it's been around for a long, long time. So I highly recommend you join it and get your colleagues to join as well. All right, now to the topic at hand. As many of us know, securing federal funding can be challenging to say the least. Programs like the Inflation Reduction Act and the EPA's climate pollution reduction grants are ambitious in size. The Inflation Reduction Act alone channels $270 billion in tax credits for climate investments. However, it can be difficult to navigate what is right for your program and if it's worth the time to apply. For example, while the IRA doesn't explicitly mention composting or zero waste, there are parts that can be leveraged to help. In the US, 35 to 40% of food is wasted every year, and food waste is estimated to be responsible for about 8% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. The Inflation Reduction Act includes $5 billion in grant programs for pollution reduction. So overall, there is potential for a huge boost to not only landfill diversion and pollution prevention, but also lowering your operational costs. Our expert panelists are here today to discuss approaches and solutions to these issues. Jennifer Porter is Chief Operating Officer at Gershman, Brickner, and Bratton, the National Solid Waste Management Consulting firm. She's a certified practitioner in zero waste. She has 20 years experience in government and private sector sustainability initiatives. With her extensive experience and expertise in solid waste management, recycling, and composting program development and evaluation, she recently assisted Baltimore County, Maryland, Kent County, Michigan, and several private sector clients with research and proposal development assistance for grant opportunities. Our other presenter today is Joshua Moses. He's an associate professor of anthropology and environmental studies at both Haverford College and a visiting faculty member right here at the University of Vermont's Gund Institute for the Environment. He studied the formation of disaster expertise in what he calls the current new age of anxiety. He's worked with Nunatsiavut Inuit communities in northern Labrador on inequality, dispossession, migration, and identity in the context of recent land claim settlements and large-scale resource extraction. He has also conducted research in the Northwest Territories on migration, housing, and homelessness. His focus on action, research, collaborative research methods, and community-engaged research has led him to work with a number of community and environmental organizations. Joshua also focuses on the response of educational institutions to climate change and the ways we are or are not preparing students for futures that society itself struggles to imagine. Please welcome Jennifer and Josh, and I'll let you both take it away from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Corey. Let me go ahead and share screen. Josh and I are going to share the presentation today. So I'm just so happy to be here and to see everybody on this. It's awesome to see where everyone's coming in from. I'm coming from New York State in the Catskills, and so happy to be here and have Josh co-presenting. So again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this presentation entitled Climate Crisis, Federal Funds for Transitioning Campuses Toward Zero Waste, Zero Emissions. It's a long title, but really our message is simple. There's now very new significant federal funds, as Corey alluded to, available for colleges and universities to really radically transform campuses to be leaders in climate change, adaptation, and mitigation, both in built environments as well as curricula and organizational structures. So that's what we're going to cover today. Our goals for this talk are to give you tools and practical guidelines and resources to help you align your campus facility plans with federal funds to cut costs and improve sustainability outcomes. We really want this infrastructural work. We want to talk about that through the lens of a parallel process in which interventions in the built environment have various organizational co-benefits, and we want to help you build multi-stakeholder teams to effectively implement high-impact projects. So for what we're going to cover today, I'm going to begin with the discussion about federal funding, focusing specifically on the Inflation Reduction Act, which I'll refer to as the IRA, and then Josh will define and discuss the parallel process aspect, and we'll end with a roadmap, which we hope gives you practical steps that you can take if you're interested in pursuing a campus improvement project which leverages federal funding. So for some basic background on the IRA, on August 16, 2022, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. The passage of the IRA alongside the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed a few months prior to the IRA signifies that for the first time in history of the United States, really the full financial power of the federal government is aligned behind the clean energy transition. For myself, and I think for many proponents of sustainability, this is what we have been waiting and working toward. Really a holistic, economy-wide approach that grows the supply of clean energy and makes it cheaper, while incentivizing a broad variety of activities around greenhouse gas emission reductions, with a particular focus on benefiting communities struggling with poverty and disinvestment. The IRA is a major piece of legislation projected to raise $739 billion in revenue over the next 10 years, with $433 billion allocated to spending, the blue circle there, nearly 90% of which will be directed toward energy and climate-related activities. So this means that there is now at least $386 billion allocated through the IRA to help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% over the next decade and help us reach the national goal of net zero emissions by 2050. The IRA consists of 9 titles with 89 provisions related to climate change. It's massive. It includes 24 new or modified tax incentives and tens of billions of dollars in grants and loan programs. What we wanted to share today in particular is one aspect that everyone here on the call should be focused on right now, which is CPRG, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants. Almost every state in the US, and I know we have a variety of folks on the line right now, every state received phase 1 funding to write a public climate action plan. Those are due in March of this year. But in terms of advocacy now, you should know, number one, who's working on your PCAP, and make sure that recycling is on the strategy for combating climate change. The phase 2 deadline is April 1st. So a good question for you right now is your university or college pursuing it? And if they are they part of a coalition to apply, or are they applying directly themselves? And again, ensuring that recycling is included as a strategy. So if you work for a nonprofit higher ed institution, my guess is that at least some of you have had experience in the grant world. There's a whole variety of projects and initiatives on campuses and universities that are typically grant funded. Sometimes there's a grant office that you may have to support this work, but generally speaking, there is an idea associated with the fiscal need and a grant out there that might meet the need, and the task is to make a compelling case for your project in the grant world. What we have up on this slide are the tax credits, and that's a completely different funding mechanism. So to receive the tax credit, your project has to meet certain requirements, but if it does, then the funding is guaranteed. So the tax credits provided in the IRA present a massive opportunity to drastically and quickly build out new infrastructure for the clean energy economy, and it's our job to make sure that higher ed institutions take full advantage of these opportunities. So while this is an energy-focused funding mechanism that doesn't always easily apply in materials management world, the tax credits do present some opportunities to build on new on-campus infrastructure, particularly food waste recovery through anaerobic digestion. So in terms of magnitude, if you think back to the previous slide with the $386 billion allocated to climate and energy spending, over half, or $216 billion, will go toward project-based tax incentives. However, it's not a capped amount, meaning that if there's more projects that are able to take advantage of the funds are guaranteed. So for those who've never worked with tax credit, it's a federal policy lever to help induce what has been the private sector to make investments in projects with socially desirable outcomes. And then if the federal government wants to achieve an objective, it can spur the private sector to undertake an activity in lieu of a government mandate that says you must do it. So tax credits are used to fulfill corporate or individual federal tax obligations. We calculate our taxes owed, and then the tax credit can be applied to pay the taxes. What the IRA has is more than 20 new or updated tax credit programs. And 2 of the most powerful are the ones you can see on this slide. The Renewable Energy Production Tax Credit, PTC, and the Business Energy Investment Tax Credit, ITC. They're actually not new, neither of them, but they've been updated in ways that have major implications for nonprofit colleges and universities. So the PTC, production tax credit, has been around since 1992. And to get it, you have to build your clean energy system, such as a solar or geothermal, and start producing electricity. And every time you produce a kilowatt hour of electricity, you earn a tax credit. The investment tax credit on the right was enacted almost 15 years ago, and it's based not on production, but rather the value of the dollars invested. So what the IRA does is extend these tax credits and expand the projects that are eligible and increase the amount of money available. There's a certain base tax credit amount involved in these. So as long as the project meets certain labor requirements, and additional bonus credits are given for domestic materials and for siting the project in a disadvantaged or energy community, such as a brownfield site or a former fossil fuel extraction site. So these are complex tax credits, and different projects that you may have would qualify for different ones, but the IRS is still developing some of the rules that will govern this and how these incentives will roll out. But it's really exciting and good to be aware of, to keep tabs on for your projects. Okay, so the key part that we want to highlight here, it's one of the most significant changes, and I believe the one that has the potential to truly and deeply transform college and university campuses throughout the US, is the fact that this is direct pay, also referred to as elective pay, option for non-tax paying entities. So this is new in the IRA across the board. So for the first time, states, cities, and nonprofit entities, so basically anyone not currently paying tax that wouldn't have in the past been able to take advantage of a tax credit because they didn't have any tax burden, they can now elect elective or direct pay, by which the face value of their credits is treated as a cash tax payment. So in other words, a check from the IRS for up to 50% of the project cost. This is really the once in the generation investment in rebuilding the energy infrastructure of our economy, and colleges and universities can absolutely take advantage of this incredible resource. And remember, unlike grants, these credits are not competitive. So if you qualify, you're eligible to get the direct payment. Really exciting. Okay. So our challenge today on campuses is to make the transition from climate advocacy to implementation. And we have to make this transition quickly, as the IRA funding is available for a limited amount of time and projects have to break ground within the next few years. But we finally have a set of financial tools that will help match the scale of the solutions with the scale of the problem. We've been advocating, protesting, writing, making media, teaching courses to raise awareness about climate change and develop strategies for solutions. Now we have to build infrastructure, train a workforce, and orient our institutions to implementation. It's not necessarily comfortable or natural transition to make, and it's going to come with trade-offs and new partners, but I really do think this is the opportunity at hand. Josh.
Hello, folks. Good afternoon. Really nice to be here. Thanks for having me, and apologize for being a little bit down to the wire. It's in the middle of some running around between meetings. So thanks, Jennifer. So what I'm going to talk about is something that I think you all are living every day. I think you all are familiar with this idea that in many of our campuses, we have close to 100% agreement about anthropogenic climate change, but the institutions are changing at a pace that doesn't feel like it matches the crisis. So this is a moment where we have financial incentives to get the ears of administrators, upper level folks who often only listen when there's funding available, or that's the best way to get them to listen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can use this moment to think more deeply about organizational change and the relationships between infrastructure and humans. And as you know, on campuses, many of you have experienced this, often physical plant folks don't speak to faculty or speak to administrators in the same ways that we would like them to. So infrastructure transformation is a human values-laden design challenge, and the process provides an opportunity to make visible institutional values. So this is a moment to test the institutional values. What are institutions committed to? It's also a moment to create new relationships, to work across silos, work across divisions, work across disciplines, and work with folks on campus and beyond that we don't always get to work with. So we can transform and expand our networks, and we can think about multi-scale learning and the cascades that can occur when we transform infrastructure. Next slide. I don't think I have the power to change slides, do I? Okay, so next slide, please. So I'm going to use a few different vocabularies to talk about this, and they're kind of all getting at the same thing, but different language might evoke different things for y'all, and I'd be really keen to hear what your experiences are like in regards to what I'm talking about during question and answer. So parallel processes when two or more systems, whether these consist of individuals, groups, or organizations, have significant relationships with one another, and they tend to develop similar affects, cognition, behaviors, which are defined as parallel process. So in other words, if you set a process in motion, for example, talking about infrastructure motivated by the IRA, it can spark other kinds of conversations on campus. Maybe you have experiences from your own work. I do. I've been part of several initiatives where I've seen this happen. So conversations around campus infrastructure and green transitions is one key place to spark conversations around institutional missions, around curriculum, even around creation of new programs and departments. Next slide. Discussions about infrastructure have the possibility to convene a wide range of possible stakeholders in a system. There's a lot of funding and there's a lot of motivation. There's a lot of folks looking for a way forward, to be part of something, to engage in different ways. So such conversations may also offer possibilities for identifying constituencies that were not previously included. So again, it's a moment to think about who's in our networks, who we're used to working with, and who might be at the edge, and then beyond that edge that might end up being powerful allies, or whose voices aren't at the table. Next slide, please. So this is from a recent set of articles on multi-solving, which is kind of another way of talking about the same thing. So if departments, jurisdictions, and disciplines are just ideas, then there's nothing immovable about them. We can make these borders more permeable and conduct partnerships across them. We can even redraw them to include more of what matters in a single project or investment, using one investment of time or effort to steer towards several goals at once. So in other words, we made these departments up at some point, humans that is. They're not immutable, they're constantly changing, they're subject to historical and financial and political forces, as we're seeing in many different ways. And as an aside, don't believe the hype that higher education is collapsing. It's not collapsing, it's just changing. It's never been more powerful than in American history. It looks very different, but it's this is the most powerful economically that higher education's been ever, probably. Next slide, please. Again, parallel process. We have these silos that we all have heard about, we all live, and since I've been in higher ed now 20 years, it's a constant conversation. We're siloed. We need to break down the barriers, communicate better. So the word silo does not just refer to physical structure or organization, as we know, such as a department. It can also be a state of mind. I know it sounds poetic, but it's true. Silos exist in structures, but they also exist in our minds and social groups too. So we develop habits of mind, I think, many of us in organizational contexts, and forget that these lines can be permeable. And if we change our minds, we change other folks' minds, there's new opportunities to collaborate. And again, we have this tremendous financial incentive that's been built upon years and years of social movements and activism and, 70 years of climate data, at least. So one possibility is thinking about curricular integration. I'm sure many of you work in this space. Since I've been faculty for many years, this is where I've lived largely. So this provides new possibilities for collaboration across the curriculum. Faculty are often looking for service learning opportunities or experiential learning for students to get engaged in hands-on work. So during the planning process and design phases and beyond, there are possibilities for nearly any discipline, ranging from environmental studies to engineering to literature to design, you name it, you can find a pathway in. Next slide, please. Thinking about internal stakeholders, again, is critical. So you have facilities, staff, faculty from across campus, student environmental groups, administration, the tax department. These are folks, for example, I've never worked with the tax department, but now I would consider knocking on their door and engaging with them. Business and finance, development office, janitorial, site maintenance, the alumni office. I'm sure you could add to this. I'm sure we're missing some folks, but just thinking big about who's out there and who can engage meaningfully. Next slide, please. External partnerships. Imagining our institutions as not isolated entities, but as part of a larger ecosystem, both a higher ed ecosystem, but an organizational ecosystem that's nested. So you have local jurisdiction, city, county, and townships. You have service providers, waste management contractors, waste haulers, recycling processors, utilities, and some of the usual suspects, nonprofits, secondary education, and government agencies. And again, I'm sure you can come up with other ones that I'm missing here. So workforce development, this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I'm sure some of you are thinking about as well. There's funding for workforce development in the IRA and in the other infrastructure dollars. So thinking about possibilities for collaborating with local trade schools, maybe even not primary, secondary. Primary would be good too, actually, but secondary education and how you can build local workforce depending on your needs, where you are, into these projects. So this is a case study from my own personal experience at Haverford College. It's a small institution, but there was a very underused old gymnasium. You can imagine, like it was one of those old ones inside with like the different levels, it had like an upper level and lower level. It was really quite beautiful, but it wasn't used all that much. It wasn't functional anymore. So it was retrofitted and I was part of the planning process. And for me, this was really a unique experience where I got to work with engineers, planners, architects, faculty from across curriculum, from humanities, from sciences, and took part in planning this building. And the process, I would say, fostered this ongoing relationship among people who might not otherwise have been engaged with each other, and also created a kind of connection with the building itself that I hadn't had to a building in the past. So I think there's many faculty out there that don't necessarily think of themselves as wanting to engage these processes, but can be brought along and find these infrastructure processes quite enlivening. This building ended up winning an architectural award, not because of me, but by any means. But Laura McGrain, who is behind it. But it was just a very enlivening process and just a small example of how these kinds of infrastructure projects bring people together in different ways. Next slide, sorry.
Awesome.
Please.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Josh. We want to close up here with the roadmap so we have time to take questions. But as a result of the IRA, campus leaders like yourselves can leverage this once-in-a-generation opportunity to save up to 50% off construction and renovation costs, lead the Green Campus movement by meeting and surpassing your sustainability targets, and as Josh was just discussing, engage multiple stakeholders to ensure multiple co-benefits alongside resilient, innovative, cost-saving campus infrastructure. Every campus is unique, so the ways in which you can leverage the funds is going to depend on your specific institution and where you are in the process. But initially, you need to understand who's already doing the work and find a way to bring together folks around the co-benefits, which include the newly available funds, curricular integration opportunities, and achieving the sustainability targets that you may have. So once you have some buy-in at a higher level, whether it's a president, vice president, or CEO of your college, and you have some resources devoted to the process, you can begin phase one, which is what we have here on the roadmap. So phase one, we have two things identified: a waste and energy audit, where you're doing like a baseline assessment, mapping your energy usages and identifying sources of use and waste generation also. And then the second part of phase one is a facilities plan review and assessment. So after having the audit done, then identifying ways in which the plan can be adjusted to take advantage of IRA funds. So here's where you'd want to be integrating corollary goals around ESG and other plans that you may have in place, like a sustainability plan, etc. Then moving to phase two on the roadmap we've put forth here is a facilities plan revision. So working then with campus leadership to then update a facilities plan so that the renovations and construction and et cetera are aligned with the federal funding opportunities. And then that would set you up for your phase three, which would be implementation. That's the design to design site and finance projects. And that's where would then come in Josh's piece on the parallel process, where you have the integration curricularly and organizationally. And, you know, that parallel process, I would say too, would be starting from the beginning, but you have some discrete steps here outlined in phase one and two as we try to bring it to an actionable work plan for you. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. We put up some resources here. We know this is a complex topic with a lot of moving parts, so please reach out to us. There's our emails up on the screen. I know Corey said you guys are going to get the slides afterwards, but we're happy also to chat now. So I'm going to stop sharing, and that way we can also kind of see the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Josh. Thank you, Josh. Really, I really appreciate it. Yeah, a lot of material there to sift through for sure. I mean, I think people look at institutions and universities as bureaucracies, and then when you start bringing in federal government and grants, it can be a little overwhelming, to be sure. So I definitely wrote down some notes, but I want to get to some folks who have entered some questions. The first one I'm going to read is from Maggie, and she asks, we have a significant amount of ag waste, and we're seeking funding to improve and expand our capacity to compost it on our campus. Doesn't seem to be eligible for programs focused on human food waste streams or even green waste. Any hints on where to look for support for this need?
Yeah, the piece that we have with the IRA, Maggie, as you noted, is it's focused. It's really not a waste related bill, right? It's energy focused. So that's where we're identifying in terms of food waste, to have the energy component with AD is the way to get that to fit. So in terms of, can I still see her question? There it is. Yeah. So in terms of we can follow up with you too. I don't know. Are we going to be able to folks email us, Corey, or we can also follow up with some resources in that regard?
Yeah, I think, I mean, not only will we be providing this, but if folks have your email addresses, whether Jennifer or Josh, I think folks are free to follow up with whomever they wish if they have questions. Yeah.
Okay, great. Because I feel like I can get you some more of those. I'm thinking just off the top of my head, there definitely is focus on food from all angles. This focus is on the energy piece, but I'm just thinking about some of the resources from the circular economy kind of organizations and resources. So I think I can get back to you on that.
Great, thank you. Okay, are private colleges eligible?
Yes. So the part that I was saying, actually have been eligible. So it would be an interesting conversation if you're a private entity, and then, like you said, Josh, maybe you never talked to the tax or finance department before. So finding out what have you already taken advantage of in this regard, because I would expect that probably has already been the case. The new aspect here is that people that never before looked at it because they were like a nonprofit entity or also government, that's the kind of new open door here. But yeah, I would definitely find out what you've already taken advantage of if you're a private entity.
Can I add something to that? So,
Yeah.
Larger state universities and major research universities they pay a lot of money, as you might know, to consultants and lobbyists in DC who keep them apprised of legislation. And
Yeah.
smaller institutions, they may not even know. I've talked to a couple provosts, presidents, vice presidents who weren't really aware of this, or was only peripherally aware. This was a couple months ago, so maybe by now they know. But so there's a capacity issue. So you might end up educating folks, particularly at institutions that have fewer resources.
Right.
So you may be the person who says, "Hey, you know that we can do this."
Thank you. Yeah. There's a message that came into the chat from Neil that I want to read. He asks, can projects be just for waste reduction, or do they also need to include energy use, et cetera?
Yeah, for this, that's, sort of to Maggie's question too. For this that we outlined, energy is the key that we're identifying as the way to get through. So it could be energy reduction, but it has to have it's not just, this is not for just waste programs, solely waste programs.
Great. I also just want to highlight the link that Joshua put in the chat about the book. Josh, you want to say a couple of words about why you recommend that book?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's just a really succinct, excellent book on systems organization change. And Ackoff was one of the big systems thinkers coming out of the 70s. And it's funny. The case studies are great. And every time I read it, I learn something or remember something I forgot about how bureaucracies work and how we can figure out ways to transform them.
Great. Thank you for that. For a not-for-profit institution, when you say, quote, direct payment, is it actually a check written to the university, or does it come in the form of a tax credit?
No, so that's the thing. So if you have if you in the past have not had a tax obligation, you wouldn't be seeking these programs, which, as I was saying, have been in existence. Some are new in the IRA, but many have been in existence. So in the past, you wouldn't have been seeking them because it would have no impact. Now it can. And so let's, assuming that the tax credit exceeds any tax that you would owe, since you are not a tax-paying entity, yeah, it's a direct pay. It would then become in the form of a check to the university. It's not like held because you don't owe tax. You're not going to owe tax. Same thing for like a municipality.
Thank you. Here's another one. Can investing in switching from fossil fuel vehicles to electric vehicles be funded through the Clean Energy Investment Tax Credit?
Yeah, that is a good question, and there are definitely electrification incentives, so we can follow up on that. We've been really focused on, we identified about a dozen provisions that we think are particularly waste related, and in terms of the intersection with energy. But yes, and we can follow up on that.
Next one. Are there any examples of public or state universities using federal funding for waste/recycling initiatives successfully? I think you sort of addressed this, or examples of potential initiatives that would meet the federal funding requirements.
Yeah, as I said, in terms of this legislation, since literally the rules are still being written by the IRS, we don't have projects that have gone through the cycle and been funded, but we can look to some examples from the BIL last year. There was the Swiffer grants that came out, so that's a list that I can try to get, and you can kind of see what was funded through that federal program.
Great. And I would just add, I would just interject that Recycle listserv, which we mentioned earlier at the beginning, and I know that our web tech Carly dropped a link there. This is a great opportunity for this discussion to happen on that Recycle listserv. For
Yeah,
folks who are there, you're familiar with it. For folks who aren't there, this is a great opportunity to post some of those questions and get a wide variety of answers from folks at different institutions, for-profit, public, state, contractors and consultants like this, faculty, staff, etc. So please join that listserv and let's encourage the discussion. Is there a list of different federal grants and funds? Is there a list of different federal grants and fund applications that schools could take advantage of for waste reduction or diversion projects?
that is, I'm just actually putting in the chat. Can I put the chat into everybody or just to you, Josh?
I'll see if I can figure out a way to.
And then, anyway, if I had the list from the EPA for the Swiffer grants that I was mentioning. You can see what was initially. I'll just put it in there. You might have to copy it, Corey.
Okay.
We can. I don't have like a handy list of that, but I think that that's a great, and to your point about the continuing discussion board, I feel like this could be a useful follow-up on that as to, because who's not going to find that helpful in terms of there's aspects of this like you're going to have the slides, and so this is specific to the IRA and the credits, but I think that that's a good next step.
Yeah. Great. Someone says, awesome presentation. Thank you. Where can we find guidance on what projects and materials qualify for the US made 10% rebate or elective pay?
Yeah, that would be from the actual what we know of it right now is what is written. I can get you that link, Charlotte, but it's like I said, some of it is still in literally drafting format or editing format.
Okay. Thank you. Needing to include energy. Okay, so needing to include energy creation. Does that mean that the program would need to include things like plastic burning if you write in recycling, pyrolysis, gasification, and chemical recycling are not recycling and have been proved as false solutions to waste?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, again, we're in the midst of seeing what happens with this. This is monumental moment here. It's really focused on, from our perspective, we're focusing on the AD from food waste because it not only has the energy production, but also the climate benefits.
Yeah. And that person just adds, also curious if promoting recycling still feels like an effective tactic. Less than 9% of plastic actually gets recycled.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Young. From PLAN, which is the Post Landfill Action Network. So thank you, Young, for adding that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Q&A still open. Please feel free to folks, and for folks, if they want to just chat, you're also welcome at this time. If you want to jump on and share with us, you can start your video. We can unmute you if you have anything, but there's no more Q&A in the Q&A at this point. I was just wondering personally, two things that I wrote down. Number one, Josh, when you mentioned curricular integration and sort of curricular and operational integration is where I was drawn to, because like myself and a lot of folks here, we're on the operations end of a lot of this sort of stuff in facilities and sustainability offices. And I was wondering if maybe you could just speak a little bit more to maybe some of your experience with curricular and operational integration and maybe some successes or a success story that
Yeah. Thanks for the question. So every institution is different, obviously, and I spent a lot of my time at Haverford College. For those of you who don't know, it's about 1,300 people. So it's quite small, different from UVM. We've done a bunch of different projects. I'm in one of my departments, environmental studies, so I work with a mathematician there who's been working with students and facilities on a whole bunch of metrics for sustainability related to the use of electricity. There's been a bunch of collaborations we've had with the grounds folks on looking at what's planted and doing some research on alternatives to Roundup. What else? I'm trying to think. The big one for me was the one I mentioned, the building, and there were students involved with that as well, because that was a big infrastructure spending. I can't remember how much that cost, like 10, 15 million or like that. But
And also just brought up a great example about how people get interested in things, even if it's not in their field or their avenue. I mean, I work with planning, design, and construction all the time. And if you mention to anybody that there's a new building or retrofit, it's amazing how many people come together and have feedback. And it could be, could be envelope feedback, it could be just the interior design feedback, it
yeah,
could be functional. But people start to get a little excited when they start to get invited to that discussion.
exactly. And sometimes people just don't know. You get somebody who's been in the library reading books for 30 years, and not to knock it, that's a great thing to do, but they don't know what's going on. So sometimes it's about you educating them and bringing them in ways that they never thought of themselves in these roles, or even being interested in buildings, but then they become interested. And some of these folks can become real advocates, depending on your institution. Faculty can get together and make things happen or make things not happen, which is sometimes the
Right.
case too.
Right. Yeah. A quick technical announcement. Sorry, forgive me. I don't think you can you can't jump on the camera, but I think you might be able to unmute yourself. And if not, we may be able to unmute you. And if not, you can always just drop your question into the chat. So as always, you think that we'd be experts with Zoom after all these years post-pandemic, but I'm still learning things on how to run this show. And so one other thing I wanted to ask is another topic that I am really working on hard is workforce development, because this information is great. The grants, the money, the financing, but how do we put it in place when we don't have the people, the boots on the ground to do this stuff? So I'd love to hear from either of you or anybody.
Corey, we should meet. Because there's a bunch of stuff at UVM going on regarding workforce development. So I'd rather hear from other folks, but I've just talked to Kirk Dombrowski, he's the vice president of research and economic development, and it's on his radar. There's all kinds of things happening in regards to a new technology hub with huge amounts of funding.
Did you mention either of you that is there money in the IRA for
Yeah,
workforce
there is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, I worked in my background, I was in recycling and materials management on the West Coast for a number of years with the city of Portland. And when I came back east before getting back into it, I had a foray into workforce development with a nonprofit organization. And I'm really passionate about this because it like, as we're saying, absolutely makes sense if we don't integrate. And I think the collaboration of higher ed, K-12, the workforce system, which is, at the county level, such an elaborate network of training and opportunity that it's a huge, back to your list of people, Josh, to collaborate with, like absolutely putting, I don't know if we had them on there, but the people whose job right now is to figure out how to use the federal resources that they have. And now it's just going to expand. I think tying into those folks, because every county has them. And they have, I mean, at points in the pandemic, and obviously the institutions benefited from this too, but folks had incentives for retraining programs. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that.
A lot. And Vermont has I don't want to make this too Vermont centric, but I imagine some of y'all also experiencing this. Vermont has this cycle of housing crisis, lack of workers to build, and this kind of spiraling down that this is a great opportunity to engage this funding, to at least intervene a bit. And I know some of the state reps are working on it. Daisy Berbico is interested in these issues out of Winooski and some other folks. So
great.
And we can talk offline about that. Super exciting.
And so somebody dropped in the chat from the EPA link, Jennifer, that you gave us. I don't know if you saw that comment. Yeah, that hasn't awarded. I'm wondering if a lot of this stuff just hasn't, the grant is relatively new. It gets announced maybe a year or two or three ago, but by the time the process gets put into place, I wonder what the timeline is between the grant, this whole process being announced, people applying, funding getting funneled, and the projects actually coming to fruition. Is that something we're going to see, later down the line?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing right now is just the people that are most well positioned to have been on that first round, because Swiffer actually wasn't part of IRA, it was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law last year, and we're waiting for the next Swiffer the timeline to be announced for this year. So that was just the initial round. So those, you have to imagine, you'd have to be pretty organized. You're not going to, and in fact, what happened last year when it came out right before the end of the year and then was due rapidly. So it was like holidays and it was like the worst time. You'd have to have been very prepared. And I think for bigger institutions or people that previously hadn't even been tracking on these things, there's no way you were ready at the gate with your application to go in by. I think they extended it to February 15th, but I mean, it was crazy. So I think now we're all becoming more clued in. We're going to see a lot more entities that in the past didn't even look at this stuff take advantage.
Yeah, and I love, again, this is not always the best format for back and forth chat other than the panelists, but I love to hear at some point from other folks who have the capability of looking at these grants, finding out what's available, and have the resources to kind of turn around on them and make it happen. Because I know a lot of folks, these things came through, whether it's federal, whether it's, it might be EPA, it could be state, could be regional, and it's overwhelming to sort through some of the paperwork, some of the links, some of the requirements.
Yeah.
If it makes sense, even just getting an answer, like somebody posted the question, can private entities do it? It's, for example, is University of Vermont considered a state institution if it's a municipality or not? So I don't know if there's a great resource that either of you could point folks to kind of answer some of those questions, or is still a lot of wading through that muck to come up with those answers?
That's one thing I think we both can be resources too to help point people. So please everyone has our emails, and if there is a clearinghouse, I mean, obviously you can take the federal page links and kind of go around there, but you can also get lost in rabbit holes on there pretty quick. So we're happy to help connect people. I think one of the things that I like most about my job now is that there's so much work to do. It's not about, oh, you have to work with me on this project in particular. I mean, it's like there's so much to do. I really enjoy that connecting part. So, just don't be shy in terms of reaching out.
Same,
Great.
likewise. And I put a few links in there. The City Renewables is a good one. There's someone at Rocky Mountain Institute who's kind of stepped out of her role. I shouldn't name her because I'm worried like lots of people are going to call her. But she helped create the America's All In. She led one subsection of that, Tansy Massey Green, and she's like this encyclopedic like computer brain on all of this stuff. Anyhow, but this
it's great to know that person.
Yeah, I know she moved on to a different role, so I can't remember what she's up to these days. But the City Renewables site I haven't gone too deep into it, but at first glance and going through it a bit, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and Jennifer just dropped in the recycling partnerships. I've worked with them before. They're a great organization.
I can't, mine is not going to everybody, you guys. It's only going to hosted panelists. I can't,
Yeah.
in the drop down, I can't do it. I don't know why.
We can have our Carly, our backend tech can post that in there. Well, again, there's no more Q&A. So again, if folks aren't posting anything, there's been a bunch of people saying thank you. And somebody did say they're working on a Swiffer funded project with the state of Delaware.
Okay.
However, they had that project all lined up when the grant was announced. So it looks like they were ready to go.
Yeah.
Which is great. And it's also just a good note for folks to be prepared. If there's a way to start planning, have to get their ducks in a row a little bit and start a file or a subcommittee to work on some of these things to say, hey, when the next round of funding comes through, let's make sure we have a shovel ready project that we can identify for that. So even having that scope of what your future work might be is helpful.
I'm going to put the other one, and there's a lot. I think compiling this is a great idea, but I put closed loop in there too.
Great. Wonderful. And Carly, if you want to just drop in the last slide, I will just once again tell folks, if you're not familiar with Kirk, if you are familiar with Kirk, you may notice that there's a new logo. We've kind of rebranded ourselves a little bit, and you'll see that we have a new, what we're calling a tagline. So we used to be known as Kirk. The acronym stood for the College and University Recycling Coalition. We're sort of getting past that as we move into a century of circularity and sustainable resource solutions. We're beyond just recycling. We know that we're not going to recycle our way out of climate change. So keep an eye out for that. But again, today's webinar will be available on our website, kirk3r.org. So you'll see that. You'll see all the requisite information to get in touch with both Jennifer, Josh, and anybody else that's on this. The topic hasn't yet to be announced for the Thursday session, but it will be April the 18th at 2 p.m. There's a couple of options right now. We're looking at alternative framing of waste reduction and diversion and integrating waste reduction into curriculum. So that may be one. And also there's an opportunity to submit a proposal if folks are interested for a webinar series at kirk3r.org. You can either submit a proposal for a topic or to present on one of our existing topics. So we'd love to have folks join us at any of these. And again, don't forget to sign up for the Recycle listserv. But yeah, thank you, Jennifer and Josh. Any last comments either of you would like to share with the group?
Just thanks, everybody. It's really energizing to hear your excitement over this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks for making time and for your attention and thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. Looking forward to connecting with you right here.
Yeah, let's make that happen, Corey.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you next time.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.